Welcome back to Pro AV Today. Accessibility in education is second only to the curriculum itself, and technology is enabling that more than ever. To have this conversation, we brought on Mark Roslon, Director of Product Management for Commercial Projectors at Epson. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Mark, we're really entering a season where we're kind of coming out of really the first shows of the year for EdTech. Give us just a quick 1 minute overview. What are some of the things that you're seeing in EdTech specifically?
Well, it's great to see everybody back in person. It's been a long drought of not being able to get out and amongst educators, decision makers. So this TCEA show that we're attending this week is our first opportunity to get on our feet on the ground and have some really great interactions. So it's really just good to see people back in person because there's certainly a lot more richness of interaction in this format. So we're really excited, learning a lot of interesting things and perspectives. The education landscape keeps changing, so we're trying to keep pace with it.
Well, you talk about the education landscape changing. One of the things that I've seen more of this year, really than ever before, is commercial displays. Everything from screen sharing tools all the way up to literal full-scale integrated computers and monitors. What are some of the things, specifically coming from the Epson side, what are some of the things that you guys are seeing in the commercial display side of EdTech?
Yeah, so a lot of interesting, we've actually been talking a lot to both IT decision makers within schools as well as teachers to understand their technology usage. And what's becoming very clear is that old concept of sage on the stage is evolving, and most schools and most teachers are migrating towards kind of a facilitator role. And this is where technology really comes into play in a kind of enabling collaboration and interaction, really getting the students to be much more involved actively in their education versus having the teacher up front with a big display, and really that being the main mode of delivery of information. So we're seeing that emerge all over the place, and it's really exciting because it creates opportunity to interact with technology both on a large scale at the front and more on a smaller scale, perhaps with mobile devices, one-to-one device computing. Amongst the students. So it's a pretty exciting time, but as you can imagine, also an overwhelming time for teachers with all the different technology choices.
Well, you talked about bring your own device and really giving accessibility to students, really that being the next step in display and integration, but what are some of the other technologies that you anticipate seeing in the coming years, specifically on the display side?
Yeah, on the display side, it's really leveraging size, for example, to accommodate all of the content that is now needs to be shared, right? So historically, maybe you have a single kind of piece of content that you're sharing with the whole class, but now in certain circumstances, if it's a hybrid teaching situation where some students may be on site, some may be remote due to pandemic, whatever other reasons, you're having to accommodate more content within the display. So display size and the need for larger displays is going to be a big driving force, and this is where Epson we feel like we're well positioned to deliver that in a very cost-effective manner. And then flexibility, it's the ability to perhaps resize the aspect ratio of the screen to accommodate different types of content or different activities, and also to have multi-purpose. So if you're in the case of projection, the great thing is you can create a large display at the front of the room, but when you don't need it, you can turn it off and get that space back for having a large whiteboard and normal use. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, and we see that trend of flexibility being a key thing around displays and the use of displays and how they bring content into the student activities.
Well, you talk about flexibility. That's obviously one of the things that school districts are looking for. School districts don't want to have to buy new products every 5 years. What is the current product life cycle of some of these displays look like? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Or are we talking 20 years even?
Yeah, it's certainly not 20 years anymore because the technology progresses rather rapidly. But you will be surprised at the longevity of products. We think anywhere from 5 to 7 years is not atypical. And a lot of that has to do with funding streams, Obviously, we're in a current time with a lot of stimulus dollars flowing into the education sector that are accelerating the technology refresh cycles. But under normal budgetary conditions, the schools most of them are trying to eke out the maximum amount of value out of any technology they have, including displays. So 5 to 7 years has been kind of the norm, but we're seeing that accelerate right now because of the current conditions.
Well, in a lot of ways, too, you talk about trying to generate value as an educational institution. Sometimes that can look a little bit different than maybe some traditional avenues. So as a lifetime AV kind of nerd, the normal buyer workflow installation system goes through an integrator. A lot of times, we saw it just next door at TCEA, a lot of times school districts don't want to have to go through an integrator, or they want to try and piecemeal their own solutions together. Would you say that's advisable, or would you say that's something that really could be potentially damaging for the educational institution?
I think it really depends, right? I mean, schools that have a lot of scale and perhaps can have an IT department that is well-staffed, perhaps they have sufficient resource and capability to do that, but they have so many things to deal with that to do a large-scale implementation that is really effective and cohesive is not an easy task. And as the technology landscape continues to evolve and the variety of solutions that are available becomes bigger and bigger, I think it becomes hard for a school IT department to keep pace with that entirely and know all the ins and outs of how to implement these solutions effectively. So, we've seen in the higher education space with the move to these high flex concepts where, you're accommodating remote students in class, or perhaps connecting two classrooms across a campus. The audio becomes a really big issue, the visual. It's not just display technology, it's everything that is involved there, and audio in particular becomes very crucial in terms of making sure that it's there, it's dependable, right? Because you can do without the visual, but if you lose the audio, you're stuck, right? And if you have a large classroom where you're trying to drive interaction, the quality of the audio can be really an inhibiting factor if you don't do it right. So I think as you grapple with all that progression of technology, it's difficult, and that's where the integrators come in, because they're working with this on a day-to-day basis. They're working with vendors to understand what is coming down the pipe, and they're solving those problems for a multitude of customers. So it allows them to provide a value-added role, because if they see something at one school and again derive a learning from that experience of creating a certain installation, they can translate that into the next school that they're working with, which, the schools, of course, they talk as well, but it's a lot of hands-on learning that's hard to translate.
You mentioned the progression of technology, and a lot of times that burden of operation falls on the end user, or in this case, the teacher. What does that look like from an IT management standpoint, where you're having to worry about not only training teachers on how to use products, but also troubleshooting things, right? Yeah. Projectors, as much as we love them, sometimes they just need to be power cycled, or maybe we're talking about a full realignment or redisplay. How do you put that burden on the IT team, but also empowering and enabling your teachers?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually put some of that burden, a lot of that burden, on ourselves to make our technology more robust, more, in the mission-critical applications, make sure we maximize uptime. So, for example, in a large venue classroom where you have a 20, 30,000 lumen projector, that machine can't go down. So, making sure that we have remote monitoring capability and things like that, just to prevent failures, prevent faults as much as we can. And then, we're really thinking about how to do preventive and corrective adjustments automatically, right? So in some of our products, for example, we introduced cameras that can look at the projected image and see if it's drifting or if there's some issue that's transpiring, and actually correct for that, or at least notify the Pro AV expert on site that there's an issue. So the idea is to allow the technology to work harder so that the operators, the folks who are managing these facilities, don't have all that burden on them.
Mark, your insight has been completely invaluable, and it's really something that a lot of us on the Pro AV side sometimes really ignore, right? The education and technology markets really is an opportunity for a lot of us to explore more and deeper in the Pro AV community. So we appreciate your insight, and we appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.